Hello everyone, before we begin our journey into the world of horror, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like, because what you are about to hear tonight are not just stories, they are terrifying tales that may change the way you look at the darkness around you. If you are ready, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let us begin. I'm SFC, Sergeant First Class in the Army, and I've been in long enough to know that rules are usually there for a reason. But last night, I thought I knew better. I ignored the Red Ink's SOP, Standard Operating Procedure, while on staff duty, and I thought I'd gotten away with it. Asterisk, I was wrong, and I brought the shift home with me. Asterisk, I was in my apartment. My kitchen was exactly where it was supposed to be, but the hallway was different. It was longer, and I was hearing that damn floor buffer again. Asterisk, I've been off the desk for over 12 hours at that point, and should have been in a deep post-staff duty coma. Instead, I was standing in my pajamas with my knees bent inwards as I shook with my 9mm in hand. Asterisk, I thought I escaped that building. I thought Miller being in the clinic meant the event was over. But when I woke up from a nap an hour ago, I realized I didn't bring just my laundry bag home. Asterisk, I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water. And there, sitting on my counter, was a DHA Form 1594. It wasn't a copy. It was the original from the desk. But the entries, they aren't mine. Carefully written in each block respectively. I read the notes. Asterisk 1800. SFC Crawford arrived at residence. Subject believes he is off duty. Subject is incorrect. Asterisk 1930. Subject entered REM sleep. The third floor moved into the crawl space above subject's bedroom. Asterisk 2100. Subject is staring at this log. The red ink is dry. The runner is waiting behind the refrigerator. Asterisk, I froze. I live alone. I checked the red ink folder. I'd swiped the one SSG Holloway told me was the real SOP. I flipped to a page I hadn't seen before. It was handwritten, the ink so fresh it smeared under my thumb. Rule number 9, the ghost roster. If the NCO in charge leaves the AO before the recording on the third floor finishes, the EO expands to include the NCO's primary residence. Do not check your closets. If you hear a floor buffer in your hallway, do not look at the floor. The janitor does not like to be watched while he cleans the blood. Asterisk, I heard it then. The unmistakable rhythmic worslap of an industrial floor buffer. It was coming from my hallway, the one with the hardwood floors I just waxed last week. Asterisk, I grabbed my phone to call 1SG, but the screen didn't show my wallpaper. It was a live feed of my own kitchen. In the video, I'm standing there looking at the 1594, but there's a hand, a pale, gray hand with fingers that are too long reaching out from the gap behind my fridge. It's holding a pen, a red pen. Asterisk, then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, hey, Sart, this is Miller. I'm at the clinic, but the doctors say I have cursive throat. They're going to sew my name tape onto my skin now. Are you coming to visit? The third floor missed you. It's much bigger now. It's everywhere. Asterisk, I looked at the hallway. The floor buffer sound stopped. In the silence, I heard a tick-tock audio. It was that same 6-second clip that was playing on repeat from Miller's phone from the incident much earlier. But now the lyrics were just my own name being chanted in a guttural. Wet rasp. Asterisk, I've survived 3 deployments in 15 years of the Green Machine. But as I watched the door handle to my bedroom slowly turn, I shriek like a little girl as I realized the red ink. SOP wasn't a warning for the building. It was a warning for me. I stood in my kitchen, my 9mm heavy in my hand. My apartment hallway didn't lead to my bathroom anymore. It stretched into a dimly lit corridor of concrete and eggshell paint. The smell of industrial wax was overwhelming. I wasn't in my home. My home had been annexed by the third floor. Then I saw him. Miller was standing at the end of the long hallway. He wasn't scrolling on his phone. He was holding a floor buffer, moving it in slow, rhythmic circles. His OCP uniform looked charred, and that cursive name tape was glowing a faint, sickly red. Asterisk, Sergeant First Class Crawford, he said, his voice sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I didn't finish the log. You left before the recording ended. Now I have to stay until the ink runs out. Asterisk, I didn't think. I dropped the pistol. It wouldn't work against a ghost anyway. Then I ran. I didn't run away from him, but rather I ran at him. I grabbed him by his uniform top and slammed him against the wall. The wall felt like cold meat. Asterisk, PFC Miller, look at me. I roared, using my best drill sergeant voice to break the trance. You are on my roster. I am your NCO. You do not take orders from a manila folder. We are clearing this AO right now. Asterisk, the floor buffer shrieked, a sound like a human scream. The janitor, a shadow taller than the ceiling, bloomed behind Miller. I felt a searing heat, like the heat bloom from the parade field. Asterisk, I pulled out the manila folder. I realized then what the red ink really was. It wasn't just instructions. It was a contract. Asterisk, I'm the NCOIC. I shouted at the shadow. I am the primary hand receipt holder. If Miller is short on his shift, I'll cover the balance. Sign him over to me. Asterisk, I bit my thumb hard and smeared my own blood across the relieved by line on the DA, Form 1594. Asterisk, the world tilted. The sound of the tick-tock audio reached a deafening crescendo, and then silence. Asterisk, I blinked, and I was back in my kitchen. The hallway was normal again. The smell of wax was gone, replaced by the scent of my cold coffee. Miller was slumped on my floor, breathing hard, his uniform back to normal. No cursive, just Miller in standard block letters. Asterisk, he looked up at me, his eyes clearing. Sarnt? Where are we? I thought I was on the third floor. I helped him up. He's alive. He's safe. He's back on the roster. Asterisk, it's now 23:30. Miller is back at his barracks, tucked into his bunk. The clinic staff called me earlier, confused, asking how he'd discharged himself without anyone seeing him leave. I told them he'd just walked back to the company area, and I'd caught up with him. I'm SFC. They didn't question me. They just filed the paperwork. Asterisk, but I'm looking at my hand. The red ink I used to sign the form? It didn't wash off. It stained into my skin, right across my palm. It's a permanent hand receipt. Asterisk, I'm still deployment ready. My PT score is good, and my weapon is clean. But I know that the next time my name is on that duty roster, the folder won't be behind the printer. It'll be waiting on the desk, already open to my name. If it's anything that might give me PTSD, it won't be my past deployments, but rather this damned staff duty I now have to deal with. Asterisk, the third floor didn't want Miller. It wanted an NCO. Asterisk, I have staff duty again in 3 weeks. God's help whoever is my runner for that. I was alone in the house that night, and at first it felt like any other quiet evening, the kind of silence that settles after midnight, when the world seems to forget your existence. I had chosen this house because it was far from people far from. Noise far from memories that refused to leave me. The house was old but solid, built decades ago, with thick walls and narrow hallways, and a strange smell of dust and wood that never fully disappeared. I remember telling myself that being alone was. peaceful that nothing could reach me here, that the darkness outside was just emptiness and not something watching me. I cooked a simple meal and ate it slowly, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind brushing against the trees outside. Every sound felt louder than usual, but I ignored it and tried to relax as the hours passed. The light in the living room felt weaker, as if the shadows were slowly stretching across the walls. I checked the doors more than once, even though I clearly remembered locking them earlier. I sat on the couch and scrolled through my phone until the battery died, and when the screen went black, the silence became heavier. I stood up to get a charger, and that was when I heard it, a faint sound coming from somewhere inside the house. Not loud, not clear, just a soft movement, like a foot brushing against the floor. I froze and listened, telling myself it was nothing, maybe the house settling, maybe the pipes, maybe my imagination. But the sound came again, closer, this time slower, more deliberate. My heart began to beat harder, and I could feel it in my chest and ears. I whispered hello without realizing it, and the word felt wrong the moment it left my mouth, because the house did not answer with silence. Instead, there was another sound, a breath, not mine, deep and close, as if someone was standing just beyond the doorway. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if the floor was pulling me down. I reached for the light switch and turned it on, and the hallway was empty, yet the air felt different, thick and cold. I walked through the rooms, checking each one, convincing myself that fear was playing tricks on me, until I reached the guest room. The door was open, even though I never used that room and always kept it closed. Inside the room, the window was open, letting in the night air, and the curtains moved gently. But what terrified me was the dust on the floor, broken by clear footprints leading from the window into the hall and stopping right where I was standing. I could not breathe. I could not move. I felt watched, not from one direction, but from everywhere at once. The lights flickered and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. And in that darkness, I heard footsteps moving slowly around me, circling, waiting. I screamed and ran back to the living room, locking myself inside as the sounds grew louder, hands pressing against the door, whispers filling the space around me, voices overlapping, saying my name in tones that sounded familiar, like people I once knew, people who should not be here. I spent the rest of the night curled on the floor, holding a knife, shaking and listening to the house breathe around me. When morning finally came, the sound stopped, the light returned, and everything looked normal. The footprints were gone, the window was closed, and the dust was untouched. But I know what I experienced was real, because even now, every night, when the house grows quiet, I hear it again, the slow movement, the breathing, the reminder that I am never truly alone in this house. Our city was always quiet. It wasn't the city to go for an event or for nightlife. It was more a conglomerate of people trailing back and forth on their quest up the corporate ladder. It made for a boring life. But at a certain age, I think that's exactly what you'd hope for. Unfortunately for me, I'm not quite at that age yet. Being 18 in a city dedicated to the corporate life, when you have little to no interest in it, almost feels like a prison sentence. Having to walk down these concrete, soulless streets, being enveloped by these towering buildings with countless minds trapped inside them. It's not the type of thing that makes you want to do anything. But again, it's at least a safe place for the most part. You never hear of anything going wrong. If anything, it's a little eerie. When there's this many people around, you'd expect something bad to happen every now and then. It's not like I want something bad to happen. I just find it strange is all. Which is why, when I heard of what had happened to Amberly, I was caught off guard. But the tiniest part of me felt excited. I know it's horrible, but hearing that someone from my area had disappeared, it felt like the lifeless routine had been broken. Disappeared? How long has she been missing? I said through a wince that tried to seem more concerned than excited. Her parents called in that she hadn't returned home on Thursday night. So make that 5 days, Liam said with an uncertain look. I don't know if that constitutes as a disappearance, but I suppose no one knows where she is all, though that guilty part of me found excitement in this. I felt a tight knot of anxiety that I hadn't had to deal with before. I knew of Amberly. We weren't friends, but she didn't live too far from me. Plus, Liam always spoke good of her. My brain, having to create its own beauty in this dull life, gave me license to overthink a little too much. Make the most out of the smallest of details. So you could imagine the hurdles my mind went through once I'd digested what Liam had told me. I began to ramble with no particular conclusion in mind. Okay, but our area? Do you think we need to look for her? Or what if it's a person, a group, anyone? Do we work together or distance ourselves? I mean, I'm sure she's fine, but like you never can, Liam cut me off with an unconvinced side eye. We obviously do nothing, Alex. Take a breath. What's wrong with you? It could be anything. She could just be out of town on a no-contact run for a bit. Could have rolled down a dodgy path, or something I don't know. He's always been a bit more rational than me, which has been good most of the time, keeping me away from starting a new life, or some other very unrealistic escapade. Well, yeah, but isn't your inner detective slightly concerned? I said with a half-playful tone. I know her quite well. She's a smart person. I'm sure she's okay. I hope so anyways, Liam said with a genuine concern dwelling in his eyes. Me. And Liam exchanged a few more words about Amberly and our mundane evenings. Then went our separate ways. My mind was restless for the remainder of the evening. I'd walked around on those one-note streets, everyone in their beige attire, adhering to their daily routines like they were on a conveyor belt. Me and Liam were the only two people in my area that really wanted to live a little. Apparently Amberly too, but I hadn't had the chance to really talk with her about it. Even my family. My parents were born and raised here, as most were. No one ever really has a reason to leave, or ever wants to, it seems. I don't know why it's that way. I didn't go to school here. I was at a boarding school for the majority of my childhood. My parents, being who they are, didn't have the time or desire to parent me properly. So I figured it was easier to offload me out of sight. That's where I'd met Liam. I always figured it was why we stood out a bit, here having a similar experience as kids. Or maybe we just don't have the heart. It's easy to find reasons why you're different, if you don't want to admit you have no passion. Maybe the education system here really got you excited to attack the corporate world and never let go. Feeds into the city's interests that way, I suppose. I'm certain, however, that Amberly grew up here, yet Liam was certain she was just like us. I don't know why I never got around to sitting down with her for a bit to find out for myself. Maybe I will when she turns up. I tried talking about it with my family when I got back, but they seemed incredibly disinterested. They looked at me in a way that felt disgusted when I expressed my concern. I figured they were just busy as normal, but the brief glances I'd catch off them made me think silence was the smartest route forward. With less answers than I had before, I flopped onto my bed, drained from the day, which was a foreign feeling for me. It was a restless night, but right before I was slipping into unconsciousness, I heard urgent buzzes ping off my phone. I opened it up, and across my lock screen I saw Liam's name. I need you to meet me tomorrow. There's something here you need to read. And please, for the love of God, don't talk about Amberly to anyone. I was alone in my house that night, after a long, exhausting day, and the quiet felt comforting at first, the kind of quiet that makes you believe nothing bad can reach you. I remember sitting in the living room with dim lights, half listening to the television and half drifting in my thoughts. The house was closed, every door locked, every window shut. I clearly remember checking them one by one, because the neighborhood was calm, but isolated, and deep down, I always had a strange feeling about. Nights like this, the kind of feeling you ignore because nothing bad has ever happened before time passed. Slowly, and the clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, each tick echoing in the silence outside. The wind moved the trees, and there, shadows crawled across the walls like slow-living things. I eventually muted the television and sat there listening to the house, breathing around me the refrigerator, humming the wood, settling the distant sound of dogs barking far away. Then, without warning, I heard a sound from outside, a short metallic scrape, so quick I almost convinced myself it was nothing, maybe a cat, maybe the wind, but something about it felt wrong. It was too controlled, too deliberate. I stayed, still holding my breath, listening. And after a few minutes, the sound came again, closer this time, followed by a soft thud. My heart began to race, and every sense in my body sharpened. I stood up slowly, trying not to make a sound, and walked toward the hallway. The darkness ahead felt thicker, colder, like stepping into another place. I stopped when I heard whispering voices outside the kitchen window, low, fast, and nervous words I could not fully understand, but I knew immediately they were not friendly. I backed away silently, but before I could retreat further, there was a sudden sharp crash, glass breaking and falling inward. The sound exploded through the house and froze me in place. Footsteps followed, heavy, hurried footsteps entering my home like they belonged there. I saw shadows moving along the wall, 3 of them, at least, one tall, one shorter, one moving fast, like he was excited. My body refused to move, fear wrapped around me like chains. I heard one of them laugh softly and another say, "Hurry before someone notices," and that was when I realized they thought the house was empty. I slowly moved backward into the bedroom. Every step felt like stepping on glass. Even though the floor was clear, I closed the door gently and pushed a dresser in front of it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep control. I stood there in the dark, listening to them moving through my house, opening drawers, knocking things over, whispering, arguing about what to take. Every sound felt like a knife cutting deeper into my chest. I could hear them getting closer. One of them tried the bedroom door. The handle moved slowly, testing it, then harder. Shaking it, the door rattled, and the dresser scraped against the floor. I pressed my body against it, using all my strength, trying not to make a sound. My mouth was dry, my chest burned, and tears ran down my face without me realizing it. The voices changed, then less playful, more serious. One of them said, "Someone is here." I felt my legs weakening, as if I might collapse at any second. The pressure on the door stopped suddenly, and there was silence so deep it felt unreal. Seconds passed, maybe minutes. I did not know then. Footsteps moved away, fast, urgent, and chaotic. A door slammed somewhere, glass crunched under shoes. And then everything was gone. The house fell silent again, but it was a different silence, heavy, broken, unsafe. I stayed frozen for a long time, afraid that if I moved they would come back. Eventually the pain in my legs forced me to sit down, and when morning light finally crept through the window, I came out slowly. The house was destroyed. Drawers emptied, furniture overturned, glass everywhere, the back door wide open, cold air filling the rooms. I stood there staring, unable to understand that I was still alive, that it was over. But even now, years later, every night, when the house becomes quiet, I hear it again, the scrape, the crash, the footsteps, and I know that some part of me never escaped that night and never truly feels safe again. When the sun finally rose, I did not feel relief. The light only showed me how exposed I truly was. I spent that morning moving through the house, slowly stepping over broken glass and scattered belongings, touching walls and doors as if to confirm they were real. I called the police with shaking hands and answered their questions automatically, repeating the same words again and again. They told me I was lucky that the intruders had left, that nothing worse had happened. But luck was not what I felt. I felt hollow, as if something had been taken from me that could never be returned after they left. I tried to clean, but every sound made me flinch. The scrape of a chair, the clink of glass, even my own footsteps echoed like I barely slept. The next night, And what I did, my dreams dragged me back to the darkness, to the whispers, to the pressure on the door. Days passed, and I tried to convince myself life would return to normal. But the house had changed, or maybe I had every corner felt watched, every shadow held memory. I installed new locks, bars on the windows, lights outside the house, cameras inside. I told myself this would bring peace, but instead it fed the fear, because now I was always watching, always waiting. Weeks later, on a quiet night, much like the first, I sat in the same living room, the house brighter, safer, yet my chest still tight, the cameras displayed. Empty rooms, silent hallways. I stared at the screens, trying to calm myself, when suddenly one of them flickered. Just for a second, I leaned forward, blaming the connection, but then it happened again, a slight movement in the far hallway camera, a shape passing too close to see clearly. My heart dropped. I checked the other feeds, nothing, all clear. I stood up, slowly telling myself it was a glitch, but then I heard it, a familiar sound, a soft metallic scrape from outside, the same sound that had started everything last time. My body reacted before my mind could process it. Fear flooded me instantly. I turned off the lights and watched the monitors. The backyard camera showed nothing. Then slowly the image darkened as something blocked the lens from the outside. A hand, I realized it was a hand. Someone knew exactly where the camera was. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to stay still, listening. Footsteps moved around the house, testing doors, tapping windows, just like before. But this time, they were patient, deliberate. They knew someone was inside. I locked myself in the reinforced room I had prepared after the first incident and watched the cameras, one by one, go dark. Not cut, just covered, one after another, until only my breathing filled the space. Voices returned outside the door, familiar, calm, confident. They spoke my name, softly, telling me they just wanted to talk, telling me I should open the door because hiding only made things worse. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the words seeped through the walls into my thoughts. Hours passed, or minutes, I could not tell. Then suddenly silence again. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I waited until dawn before opening the door. The house looked untouched. No broken glass, no forced entry. The cameras were uncovered, the feeds normal, as if nothing had happened. The police found nothing again. No signs, no fingerprints, no evidence. They looked at me differently this time, and I understood why. But I know what I heard, what I saw, because every night since then, just before sleep, when the house is quiet and the lights are off, I hear a knock, soft, slow, and patient, and a voice that knows my name, reminding me that the first night was only a warning, and that being alone in a house does not mean no one is coming back. We went into the forest, only looking for peace. That is how the story began, with no intention of danger or mystery. We were four friends who had known each other for years and often went on short trips together, but this time we chose a place far deeper than usual, a remote forest rarely visited by people. Everyone said it was beautiful, quiet, untouched. We arrived before sunset, parked the car on a narrow dirt road, and walked inside, carrying our bags. The deeper we went, the taller the trees became, blocking the sky and swallowing the light. The air was cold and smelled of wet soil and old leaves. At first, it felt calming, like the world had slowed down. We set up our tents near a small stream and lit a fire. As night fell, the silence grew heavier. There were no insects, no owls, no normal forest sounds, just stillness, like the forest itself was listening. We joked and laughed to ease the tension, but none of us slept well. Sometime after midnight, we heard a distant sound, wood scraping against wood, slow and repeated. It did not sound natural. We followed it, without thinking, believing it might be a cabin or an old shelter. After walking for what felt like hours, we saw it, an old house standing between the trees, barely visible, covered in moss and rot. The windows were dark, the door half open. None of us remembered seeing any building on the map, but curiosity pulled us closer. The air around the house felt colder, heavier, like stepping into a shadow that did not belong to the night. Inside, everything was frozen in time, broken furniture dust thick on the floor, old photographs on the walls, faces scratched. Outdoors leading to rooms that smelled of decay, we felt watched constantly, like eyes were following our every move. We decided to leave immediately, but when we stepped outside the forest, looked different paths. Gone trees closer than before. The house was no longer behind us when we turned back. It had vanished. Panic set in, and night stretched endlessly. We walked until exhaustion forced us to stop, and when morning came, the house stood there again, unchanged, waiting. We tried to leave again and again, but every path led back to it. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Hunger, fear, and madness slowly taking over one by one. My friends began to disappear, always after entering a room, always without sound, without trace, until I was the only one left. Now I sit inside that house writing this with shaking hands, because the forest never lets you go, and the house never ages. And if you are reading this, it means you are already close enough for it to notice you. And I woke again. I was still inside the house, the same gray light filtering through the cracked windows, with no clear source, no sun, no direction. Just endless dull daylight. My body was weak, and my mind heavier than ever. I called out my friends' names again and again, until my voice broke, but the house answered only with silence broken by distant sounds, footsteps above me, even though there was no second floor. Breathing behind walls, whispers crawling through the halls, calling me softly the way someone calls a child to come closer. I tried to mark the walls to understand the layout, but every mark faded after minutes, as if the house healed itself. I found rooms I had never seen before, staircases that led nowhere, doors that opened into the same room I had just left, mirrors that showed me standing still, even when I moved. Time had no meaning. Hunger came and went without killing me. Sleep dragged me into dreams, where the forest watched me, where my friends stood among the trees, smiling with empty eyes, telling me this was home. Now I tried to run again. I burst through the front door into the forest screaming, but the trees bent inward, the ground softened, pulling at my legs, and after hours of running, I found myself standing once more before the same door, the house. Always waiting, always patient. I began to hear my own thoughts spoken aloud by the walls, repeating my fears, my regrets, my memories from childhood, things no one else could know. I realized then the house was not empty. It was full of everything we bring with us: fear, guilt, loneliness. It feeds on those who enter the forest, seeking escape, because escape is what it promises. Days blur together. I see shadows wearing the shapes of my friends, sitting at the table, leaving muddy footprints that lead into my room at night. I feel hands touching my face when I pretend to sleep, and sometimes I wake up outside, standing in the trees, facing the house, without remembering how I got there. I am changing. My reflection in the glass looks less like me each time, thinner, paler eyes, too dark. The house is teaching me its silence, its patience, its hunger. I write this knowing it will not end, because the forest never releases what it takes, and the house never finishes with you. It only waits for the next footsteps on the path, the next laughter in the trees, the next people who believe they are only here to camp for one night. The authorities say my friends must have gone crazy. They claim no right-minded person would end things the way they did, but we were only stranded in the desert for one night. Not weeks, not months, not even a full day. 12 measly hours. Who loses their sanity over the course of a single night? There were 4 of us: Haley, Yasmin, Theo, and me. We were an unlikely bunch. Not much overlap in lifestyles, career paths, or political leanings. That said, we all had 3 things in common. We were young, we were healthy, and we all loved visiting abandoned places. Our destination that morning was an abandoned mining town located in southwest corner of our state, just a mile from the nearest highway, nestled snugly in the valley between a pair of red rock mountains. There it was. Colon was ICHU. Per usual, Haley led the charge. She flung herself from the passenger seat and began dashing towards a nearby church. Theo was livid. I, on the other hand, couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. There was something comedic about watching a woman, clad in a lavender Lululemon bodysuit, sprinting full tilt into a ghost town. Wavering slightly in the wind, the town almost seemed to shy away from Haley, as if she were an affront to their modest, God-fearing sensibilities. I slung my camera around my neck. With the midday sun beating waves of dry heat against our backs, we hopped out of Theo's Jeep and began exploring. The town wasn't much, but even from a distance, I could tell it was surprisingly pristine. As Yasmin, Theo, and I walked down Wasichu's singular street, a sense of awe embedded itself deep into my gut. The saloon's porch was weathered, sure, but none of it was outright rotten. No holes, no obvious insects chewing through the wood, not one plank out of place. The schoolhouse windows were caked with dust, but none of them were broken. We could even read the signs denoting which building was which. By my estimation, the paint had to be more than a century-old. It was incredible. Would have been even more incredible if Theo and Yasmin had the decency to fuck off somewhere else for a bit and leave me be. Couldn't focus on taking good pictures. There was Yasmin and her oral fixation with sunflower seeds, audibly shattering the shells between her teeth, sometimes discharging a red-tinged glob of spit into a napkin if one of the shards jabbed her gums and drew blood. When she finished a bag, she always had another. Theo often joked that if we were to get lost, rescuers could just follow the trail of blood, spit, and empty plastic bags to our exact location. Not to say he was any better, just as obnoxious in a different way. The man couldn't shut his damn mouth. Always chattering, always joking, always filling the air with some sort of meaningless drivel. When Haley's mom passed, he couldn't even keep his lips sealed for the whole funeral sermon. He just had to comment on the shape of her coffin. Not even a quarter of the way through, he leaned over to me, whispering about how the edges were weirdly round, like they were burying her inside a hollowed-out torpedo. Before long, I'd reached my limit. Told Theo and Yasmin I was going to splinter off on my own for a while. They were disappointed, but that was their business, not mine. I knew I'd jogged far enough ahead once. I couldn't hear the incessant chewing or the relentless jabbering anymore. I couldn't hear anything at the end of the street. Actually, ain't a lot of white noise in the desert. A gust of wind singing through a sand dune here. A grasshopper chirping in some bluegrass there. But this was different. The silence was pure, oppressive, all-consuming. I was standing in front of a squat, windowless building. A shed, maybe. Couldn't be sure. It was the only building without signage. I twisted the doorknob. Didn't open. My hand encountered a clunky resistance, like it was locked, but it couldn't have been, because on the second try, it gave way. The hinges didn't creak. My boots didn't thump against the floorboards. Everything remained silent. A red-orange flicker met my eyes, pulsing, pushing back against a hungry darkness. Candlelight. I think that's where my memories end for a while. I didn't pass out or anything. The sensation was gentler, seamless, similar to falling asleep. 1 minute, your head is resting on a pillow, and you're reflecting on your day, or reviewing what the plan is for the morning. And the next minute, you're gone, whisked away. Actually, I do remember one detail. A single sound loud enough to pierce the silence, and one that I'd recognize anywhere. Click, 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 click. The shuddering lens of my precious camera. My memories resume after nightfall. The veil rises, and I'm staring at a red-orange flicker and an encroaching darkness. At first, I thought I was still in the shed, but the scene had changed. The flames were larger, more effervescent, and the darkness was dappled with a bright array of white pinpoints, a campfire below a clear night sky. Theo's voice booms into focus. Jesus Christ, Haley. Remember what Valentina said when she circled this place on her map? Yasmin was curled into a ball on the opposite side of the fire, knees tucked against her chest, head buried in her thighs. Theo was on his feet, gesturing wildly at Haley, who was pacing so furiously that she was kicking up small clouds of sand in her wake. Yes, Theo, of course I do. Then why the fuck did you sprint into town when we got here? Valentina specifically said, "Look, don't touch." That was the plan. We all agreed. We'll stop, get a few pictures from a distance, and enjoy the fucking scenery. Haley threw her hands in the air. You really think the land is, what, cursed? That's why your car won't start? You sure it isn't your complete lack of responsibility? Your absolute failure to ever take good care of anything? I mean, give me a break, Theo. His pupils fell to the sand. Nascent tears shimmered against the roaring fire. And you know what? If we're taking a stroll down memory lane, remind me, did I put a gun to your head and force you into a situ? My eyes swung back to Haley. Guess she could feel my gaze on her, because her attention flipped to me. I'm sorry. Something you'd like to add? I shook my head no. Then stop fucking staring at. Those were her last words. Haley's anger vanished. Her arms became limp. The expression on her face turned vacant. Every muscle relaxed, except the ones that controlled her eyes. Both were bulging, practically exploding from their sockets. One eyelid retracted from view, rising so high that I couldn't see it anymore, disappearing somewhere within her skull. The other hung halfway down. There was an indent above her lashes, a crescent from how hard her iris was pushing against the inside of the lid. There was a pause. Then, all at once, her body reactivated. She started sprinting wide. Endless circles around Yasmin, Theo, and me. Haley, what are you doing? Yasmin whimper Ed. No response. No change in her facial expression. Jesus, what the fuck is wrong with you? Theo said. She didn't stop. She wouldn't slow down, and I couldn't pull my eyes away. Minutes passed. Our pleas fell on deaf ears. Her breathing became harsh. Sputtering wheezes spilled from her heaving rib cage. Her head became flushed, swelled with blood, until it was the color of a bruise. A deep, throbbing indigo. My chest felt hot and heavy, like someone was ironing my breastbone. Stop. Haley, please, stop. Yasmin screamed. Theo attempted to tackle her. He dove, but missed her waist. His arms wrapped around her shins. Haley tripped, and the ball of her left ankle slammed into the hard sand. A sickening crunch radiated through the atmosphere. It barely slowed her pace. She ran on the mangled appendage like it was the most natural thing in the world. After Theo's attempt, Haley changed her trajectory. She sprinted into the darkness, straight forward. Full steam ahead. The rhythmic snaps of shredding tissue got quieter, and eventually, we couldn't hear anything at all. Yasmin collapsed onto her side and began to softly weep, cross-legged. Catatonic, Theo turned to me and asked, Why? Why didn't you try to help? I didn't have an answer for him. All of a sudden, Theo leapt into the Jeep and jammed his keys into the ignition. Tried to resurrect his car for nearly an hour, to no avail. There was gas in the tank, and he could flick the headlights on and off, but the engine was stubbornly dead. The machinery refused to even make a sound out at some point. Exhaustion put us all to sleep. Click, 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 click. I awoke in a sitting position. My eyes were already open. I could tell that Theo was still sleeping, but I wasn't looking at him. In the dim light of the waning fire, I could see Yasmin on her knees, hunched over, spine curled. Both hands were darting between her mouth and the ground, over and over again. The scalding pressure against my chest returned. An endless series of gritty squeaks emanated from her churning jaw. The noise was hellish, but quiet. Wasn't loud enough to wake Theo on its own. Yasmin's eyes were bulging. One was half concealed behind a paralyzed eyelid. The rest of her face was loose, abandoned, a mask that obscured everything but her eyes. She was eating anything that was in front of her, and I watched her do it. It was mostly sand. Handful after handful of grainy sediment. That said, Yasmin held no culinary discriminations. Nothing was off the menu. Sagebrush, a line of ants, a few beetles, one small rodent I had trouble identifying before she shoved it into her waiting maw. Hell, I even saw her take a bite out of a tarantula. The injury wasn't fatal. It skittered away on its remaining legs before she could deliver the killing blow. Her throat swelled. Her stomach expanded. I think I heard a muted pop. Minutes later, she fell onto her back. Mercifully still, finally full. I waited, seemingly unable to do anything else. As dawn crested over the horizon, Theo woke up. He rubbed his eyes and saw me first. Petrified, motionless, upright. Incrementally, I witnessed a gut-wrenching fear take hold of him. He turned over and was greeted by the sight of Yasmin's bloated corpse bathing in a golden sunrise. Theo sprang to his feet. His mouth opened wide like he was about to say something. Chastise me for my indifference, maybe. But that's not what came out. The fear evaporated. His one eye bulged. And only then did he begin. It was the single loudest scream I had ever heard. And, God, to my abject horror, it just kept going. Seconds turned to minutes. The noise became shrill, crackling every so often. My ears began to ring. The valley brightened. Minutes accumulated. A gurgle crept into the scream. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. His lips turned the color of days-old snow, the ashy white blue of dirty slush piled high on the edges of busy streets. After about an hour, he choked, I think. Or he died from blood loss. The cause doesn't matter. He collapsed, and it was finally over. I stood, walked over to Theo's Jeep, and climbed in the driver's seat. With my camera still slung around my neck, I turned the keys. The engine growled to life. I drove home. 8 days later, I've been cleared as a suspect. The coroner examined the bodies. It's evident that I didn't lay a finger on any of them. I know better, though. I may not have touched them, but I'm not blameless. The last 4 pictures on my camera proved it. Didn't mean much to the police when they saw them, but it's meant everything to me. One shows the door of that shed swinging open. The next shows a black box on the floor, the front engraved with a runty gold symbology, surrounded by lit candles. The third is closer to the box, and the lid is up, revealing a necklace perched atop red satin. 2 small, violet gemstones dangle from a silver chain. They're fused together. One is a full sphere, one is a half sphere. The final picture is identical to the third, but the necklace is gone. I'm still wearing that necklace. I can feel the gemstones pushing into my chest. No matter how I pull, I can't take it off. All I can do. I moved into the lonely house deep in the forest because I wanted to disappear from the world, and the forest offered exactly that. The house stood alone, surrounded by tall trees, so dense that daylight struggled to reach the ground, and when night came, the darkness felt alive. The wood of the house was old and groaned with every movement as if it was breathing with me. The realtor told me no one had lived there for decades and smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable, but I ignored it because I needed the isolation. The first nights were quiet, unnaturally quiet. No wind, no insects, no distant animals. Just a heavy silence that pressed on my chest and made sleep difficult. I would lie awake, listening to my own breathing, feeling watched. Even though I was alone after a week, I started hearing sounds soft at first, like branches snapping far away, then closer every night, always stopping when I listened too carefully one evening. I found deep marks on the trees around the house long, scratches too high to be made by any animal. I knew I told myself it was stress, but the forest felt different, as if it was closing in on the house. Waiting one night while making dinner, I heard slow footsteps outside the front door, deliberate and heavy, circling the house. I froze, holding a knife, listening to the steps stop right outside the wall. Then nothing when I finally opened the door. There was no one there, only bare footprints pressed into the mud, leading back into the trees. Footprints shaped like human feet. But too long, too thin days passed, and I became afraid of the night. Whispers began coming from the forest, calling my name, even though I never told anyone where I lived. Sometimes the whispers came from inside the house, through the walls, under the floor, from the attic. That did not exist. The house had only one level, yet I heard footsteps above me, dragging movements like something crawling slowly, learning the shape of the place. Mirrors started showing things that were not there, shadows standing behind me, tall figures that vanished when I turned around. I stopped sleeping and stopped leaving the house, because every time I walked into the forest, I felt something following me, staying just out of sight, breathing close enough that I could feel warmth on my neck. One night, the power went out and the forest exploded with sound, running, screaming, branches breaking, something large moving fast toward the house. I locked every door and window and hid in the bedroom, shaking in the dark, holding a weak flashlight. And I heard breathing behind me, slow, wet breathing, filled with hunger. I could not turn around. The air grew cold, and the whisper returned louder, clearer, telling me that the house was never empty, that it was built to contain something that wears loneliness like a skin. When the lights suddenly returned, I was alone, but the walls were carved with words deep into the wood, words I did not remember writing, that said, "You belong here." Now, since that night, I no longer fear the forest, because it no longer feels separate from me. The silence speaks to me. The house listens and waits. And if you ever find a lonely house deep in the forest, standing too quiet and too still, do not enter, because I am still here, and I am no longer alone. And the days after that blurred together, because time stopped meaning anything inside that house. Morning and night felt the same. The light outside never seemed natural. Again, it was always dim, like the forest was filtering it on purpose. I stopped checking the calendar, because every page I tore off appeared again. The next day, lying on the table, clean, untouched, as if mocking me, the whispers became conversations, long, slow murmurs that spoke about my thoughts before I had them, telling me memories from my childhood, things I never said out loud, things no one else could know. And when I covered my ears, the sound came from inside my head instead. The house started changing slowly. The hall felt longer, the doors heavier, the windows narrower, like the structure was reshaping itself around me, learning my size, my fear, my habits. Sometimes I would walk into a room and forget why I was there, and when I turned around, the door would be gone, replaced by a wooden wall covered in scratches. Handprints, faces pressed from the other side, breathing through the grain of the wood at night. I dreamed while awake, seeing figures standing between the trees, watching. The house never moving, never blinking, and when I blinked, they were closer every time, closer, until one night I saw one standing on the porch, its body twisted, limbs bent the wrong way, skin stretched tight over bones, smiling with a mouth that opened too wide, and when it spoke, it used my voice, telling me to let it in, telling me it was already inside. I tried to leave the next morning, packed my things, ran toward the road, but the forest never ended, no matter how long. I walked the trees, repeated the same marks, the same broken branches, the same footprints, until I realized I was walking in circles, being guided back gently, patiently. When I reached the house again, the door was open, waiting, and I understood then that the house was not a place, but a trap, not for the creature, but for people like me, people who wanted To be alone people who carried emptiness inside, because emptiness makes room, and the thing that lives here needs room, needs a mind to stretch into, needs a voice, a shape, a life. And every night it takes a little more of me, my reflection no longer matches my movements. My smile comes too slowly. My eyes feel wrong. And if you are listening to this story, wondering if it is real, wondering if a house like this exists somewhere, deep in the forest, it does. And one day, when you are tired of noise, tired of people, tired of the world, you might look for a place to be alone. And the forest will remember you, and the house will open its door. And I will be standing at the window, watching, smiling, waiting for you to come home. And when you finally step inside the house, the air will feel familiar, warmer than the forest, like it recognizes you. The door will close softly behind you, without a sound, and you will feel relief before fear, because that is how it works. The house gives comfort first. It lets you believe you are safe, that you chose this place, that the silence belongs to you the first night. You will sleep deeply, deeper than you have in years, and the dreams will be gentle. Memories of places you loved, voices you miss, faces that make you smile when you wake up. You will notice small things, moved slightly closer, a chair nearer to the bed, a cup already filled with water shoes, placed by the door as if someone prepared for you, and you will tell yourself you did it without remembering, because that is easier than accepting the truth. Days will pass, and you will stop trying to leave, because the idea of outside will feel distant, unreal, like a story you once heard. The forest will press closer every night, trees leaning in branches, touching the walls, tapping softly like fingers asking to be let in, and the house will answer with creaks and sighs, communicating in a language older than words. You will begin to hear footsteps that match your own pace, shadows that copy your movements, a second heartbeat when you lie still, and eventually you will understand that the thing here does not hunt, it replaces. It studies you patiently, learning how to be you better than you are. And one night you will wake up standing in front of the mirror, watching yourself sleep behind you, realizing the body on the bed is no longer yours. And when the morning comes, you will smile naturally, easily, and step outside to stand at the edge of the forest, waiting for someone else to arrive, someone lonely, someone tired, someone who wants to disappear. And when they ask if the house is empty, you will answer honestly, yes, it is empty. You will say, because by then you will not remember what it means to be alone. That is how it ends, and how it always begins. The house will stand quiet again, smoke rising gently from the chimney, windows dark but clean, path cleared as if inviting, and I will wait inside, wearing a life that used to be mine, thinking thoughts that were once human, feeling emotions that arrive late and leave too soon. The forest will keep my secret, like it keeps all the others, because it feeds on silence and loneliness, and those who seek isolation are the easiest to guide. If one night you drive far from the city and see a light between the trees and feel an unexplainable calm pulling you toward it, remember this story. Remember that some places do not kill you, they keep you, they hollow you out slowly, lovingly, until there is room for something else. And when you finally realize, it will be too late, because you will already be home, and someone will be standing at the window, watching the road, smiling, waiting for the next lonely soul to arrive.